Hi, today I would like to take you through a short presentation on innovating exceptional value, or better known as disruptive innovation. First, let's just agree, where do we find this concept of exceptional value? If you look at all these companies that has achieved a 1 billion valuation in a very short period of time, you would recognize that they must have delivered exceptional value to the market. The market rewarded them in incredible traction. So we're looking at, these are all famous for innovating exceptional value. A lot of people want to know now, what is the principles and how do we look at exceptional value and how do we create exceptional value? Right, so in terms of our starting point here, is I'd like to start with the first principles behind innovating exceptional value. From the first principles, we'll then reason upwards. First principle is innovation can create value if and only if it diminishes a limitation for the market. We're going to raise innovation to a level of not just solving a problem, but truly removing a limitation for mankind. So we call it created value. The second component is innovation is necessary but not sufficient. The market must adopt new rules to realize the full value. So you can see the innovation creates the value, but the market must realize the value. And for the market to realize the value, they must first adopt some new rules, and I'll explain a little bit further. In looking at this exceptional value, we need to look at the overriding purpose. The overriding purpose of those companies that are delivering exceptional value. Their overriding purpose is to create exceptional value through removing a significant limitation for the market in a way that was not possible before, and to the extent that no significant competitor can easily copy. And that's what we're trying to achieve. In order to achieve that, let me first show you an example, and then we'll try and look into, is there a conceptual framework through which we can think. Right, let me use the case of Henry Ford, which is the Ford company. And we would like to know, what is the limitation that the motor car diminished for the market? So without waiting too long, Henry Ford verbalized as, for a person to move from the home to his job and back every single day comfortably, either by horse or bicycle or walk, he would be limited to a life space of roughly 5 miles. Everything was happening inside that 5-mile radius. So you can see that they would go to town, they would go to church, they would go to school, they would do everything within a 5-mile radius. Now 5 miles is the maximum. Henry Ford said his vehicle or his car would extend the life space from 5 miles up to 20 miles. Now we know that every person today, as you are sitting wherever you're sitting, is most probably working further than 5 miles, which means that you have got a bigger space. Now, let's just understand what happened. He could have sold the car based on call it a product-centric view, which is what are the technical benefits and features of the car, which is something like speed, capacity, endurance, night lights, prestige, fun factor, weatherproof. And people would look at it and say, okay, I need to make a buying decision on that. Or you could have sold it slightly different. On a customer-centric, he would say, look, today you are limited to a 5-mile lifestyle space. Your rule that you are following to cope with that limitation is you're focusing on essential services. In other words, the penalties that you typically pay for in that space of essential services and essential living space is that you'll have to most probably move house when changing jobs. There'll be very small trade stores. The school will most probably only be a teacher. The medical side will only be a doctor. Everything is kept to the essential. Limited labor, use what is available, and you'll find yourself long distance to market. He then said, no, this is potentially possible to now move to a 20-mile lifestyle space. Now, what is a 20-mile lifestyle space? suddenly it became possible to focus on efficient services, efficient lifestyle space. So suddenly it's easier to change jobs without having to change homes. Improve the general facilities by size. Now we can look at large trade stores, economies of scale, large schools. We can look at hospitals, lots of stuff, but everything was driven now by efficiency and not necessity. The availability is certainly improved in terms of good labor. Your product demand is now within a day. Even the things like team sport and local government became possible. So you could see that there was a dramatic shift from the 5 mile to the 20 mile. If you moved only from 5 mile to 6 miles, that would not be, you could still be in the essential services, not the efficient services. All right, so this is just to explain how Henry Ford looked at it, and then obviously we know that we're all driving cars today. Right. I want to now go and capture this framework through which we could think like Henry Ford. Through those principles of, do you diminish limitation, and what are the new rules that we need to adopt? Right, so let me start off and say, okay, here's the conceptual framework. First of all, identifying the big problem. The problem for me is twofold. There must be a limitation in the market that we are trying to remove. And secondly, the market must over time have developed rules to cope with the limitation. Those coping rules highlight to me that they have recognized that there is no solution. They accept the limitation as a fact of life, and they are going on. That for me is the statement of a big problem. So there's recognition by the market, and there's a clear limitation. Right, obviously, the first principle is we need to remove the limitation. And for that, we need innovation. He's the enabler to remove that limitation. Now, through removing it, it means that we are creating new potential value space. So we're going now beyond the limitation into the potential value space. And yes, we don't know how far that next limitation is, but at least now we're creating potential for value beyond the current limitation. Now, obviously, since there's no competitors, this would mean to you as a startup or a corporate launching a new product that you're into uncontested market space. But unfortunately, you have to do one more thing. The market now must stop the old rules and then start to adopt the new rules. If they follow the old rules of coping with the limitation, they will just be acting as if the limitations still exist and will not be actually seeing any of the potential value coming through. So in order to get them to adopt the new rules, you'll most probably need a catalyst, and I'll explain a little bit later on what the catalyst is all about. Now, the moment the market starts to adopt the new rules, the following would happen. So the rules to realize the potential value is now adopted, and slowly the market is now turning the potential value into realized value. That's very critical. Now, the catalyst is there only to convince the people to go and adopt the new rules. Because through the new rules, you realize the value. And the catalyst is then, what is the minimum value guarantee for a customer to be convinced to adopt the new rules? And once that minimum value guarantee is there, the market are moving on towards that. All right, so this in basic terms is the conceptual framework for creating exceptional value. I want to tackle the next step just to understand the big shift that's going to potentially start to happen. According to Edward Deming, if you do not know how to ask the right question, you discover nothing. Using method without principle equals asking the wrong questions, equals trial and error method. There's nothing wrong with it. It just says until we do not understand the principles underlying exceptional value, innovating exceptional value, we will be selecting methods that we don't understand. Using a method with principle equals asking the right questions, equals a cause and effect method. Now, the cause and effect method is 10 times more reliable than trial and error method. Today, innovation is moving from the trial and error method towards the cause and effect method. dramatically improving the odds. In order to look at some engagement model, so the first question is, you're looking at your product, you want to understand, is there a possible mismatch between my product and my market in terms of value? And how can I, in the shortest possible time, find the perfect match? How do I go from a possible mismatch to knowing that there's a perfect match where we're delivering exceptional value? Now, the first step is obviously we need to assess the risk. Is there a risk of a mismatch? If you have a mismatch, it will act as a market adoption constraint and you will not get traction. You'll be below your expectation in terms of market traction. Once we assessed the risk, you need to start dealing with the risk. We can deal with the risk through 3 stages by aligning your offering towards the customer, delivering exceptional value to the customer. So the first stage is basically, are you truly removing a limitation for the market? Is your invention truly removing? We will then test it against that to understand what's the intrinsic value or the potential value that you're creating. And we call it, at that stage, what's the possibility of a match? Then we go into stage 2 of alignment. Now we're dealing with the adoption of the new rules. Is there a risk? And how do we deal with the risk of adopting? And how will the customer realize the full value? What are the basic rules that the market must adopt to get them to realize the value? So if they don't move from essential mindset to an efficient mindset, the car would be a loss. So once we verified that, then we said, okay, there's a probable match. So you're moving now from possible to probable. The final one is, can we now make it so convincing, align our offering in such a way that it's so convincing to the market that it moves from anything like a nice-to-have product to a must-have product? We do this by looking at the catalyst, and through the catalyst, we are designing the value guarantee that counts. What's the minimum value you are prepared to guarantee to be convincing to the market to adopt the new rule? The rule will unavoidably result in him realizing the value. We then test that against a known market group, focus group, and we see what's the proven match. That, in essence, gentlemen, is a process and the principles and a conceptual framework for dealing with innovating exceptional value. Last word of mouth is hopefully strong. If you feel you've gained good value from this short presentation, then please help me by sending this YouTube link to a few of your close contacts. Thank you.